Celia Owens had only meant to grab a quick coffee after a long board meeting, but instead, she found herself cornered in a narrow alley behind the cafe by two men who clearly had no respect for the word no. "I said I'm not interested," she snapped, stepping back as one of the men blocked her path. "Come on, sweetheart. You're dressed like that and expect us not to say something," the taller one sneered, inching closer. Celia's heart pounded. She could handle billion-dollar negotiations and cutthroat mergers, but this was different. She glanced behind her, but the alley was empty. Her car was parked too far. Her driver had stepped away. She cursed under her breath. She hated bringing attention to herself, hated being seen as anything other than just a woman walking alone. The man reached for her wrist. "Hey." A deep voice barked out, sharp and commanding. All three froze. The man who stepped into the alley wasn't dressed in a suit or armed with anything but a solid build, a baseball cap, and the kind of glare that made grown men rethink their life choices. He had a little boy clinging to his hand and fire in his eyes. "You got 2 seconds to walk away," he said, voice low but dangerous. The taller man scoffed. "Mind your business, man." "Wrong answer," the stranger replied. He stepped forward, shielding Celia with his body. "You want to try me, go ahead. But you'll be spending the night in a hospital." The two men exchanged glances, then backed off, muttering under their breath as they disappeared around the corner. Celia exhaled, finally letting go of the tight grip she had on her purse. "Are you okay?" the man asked, turning to her. She nodded, still catching her breath. "Yeah, thanks to you." The little boy peeked up at her from behind his dad's leg. "Are you hurt?" Celia crouched down. "No, I'm okay. Thanks for checking on me, buddy." He smiled shyly, tightening his grip on his dad's hand. "I'm Sawyer Grant," the man said, offering his other hand. "This is my son, Liam." Celia Owens. She hesitated for a second but shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm. "You really didn't have to." "I did," he interrupted. "I don't like bullies." She stood a little straighter. "Well, I owe you one." Sawyer looked down at his son, who was tugging his hand. "We were just grabbing ice cream. You want to join us? Might help shake that off." Celia blinked. She hadn't expected that. Sure, why not?" They ended up at a small local shop just around the corner. Liam picked the most colorful scoop he could find, and Sawyer got black cherry. Celia surprised them both by choosing mint chocolate chip. "You sure you're okay?" Sawyer asked again once they were seated. "Yeah," she said, meeting his eyes. They were a deep hazel, warm and honest. "I'm just not used to people stepping in like that." "Well, I'm a dad. It comes with the territory." "You're not worried about bringing your kid into something like that." "I'm teaching him what's right," he said simply, then smiled at Liam, who was happily demolishing his cone. It was strange how easy it felt, how natural. "So what do you do?" he asked. Celia hesitated. "Consulting." He raised a brow. "That's vague," she laughed. "It's supposed to be," he chuckled. "Fair enough. I run a small construction company, mostly local work. Keeps me busy." She nodded. "That sounds real." "It is," he said, watching her. "You don't seem like you get much real." She looked away, smiling into her cup. He had no idea. They talked for another hour, about Liam, about school, about how Sawyer had raised him alone since his wife passed away 3 years ago. Celia listened, fascinated by how grounded he was, how fiercely he loved his son. He didn't ask for sympathy. He didn't brag. He just talked like someone who'd learned how to keep going. Something tugged in her chest. Eventually, they stood to leave. "I'll walk you to your car," Sawyer said. "Just in case." She didn't argue. When they got to the black town car parked along the curb, the driver immediately stepped out and opened the door. Sawyer blinked. "You, ride like that often?" Celia gave a small smile. "It's just easier." He didn't press. But something flickered in his eyes. Suspicion, curiosity. She couldn't tell. "Thanks again," she said as she turned to him. "Really?" He nodded. "Anytime." Before she could stop herself, she leaned up and kissed his cheek. "By Liam, that puppy he keeps asking for." Sawyer laughed. "You've known him an hour and he's already got you wrapped." She grinned. "He's got good taste." She slid into the car, heart still racing, not from the earlier scare but from him. Sawyer Grant, strong, real, uncomplicated. And completely unaware that the woman he just saved was one of the wealthiest women in the state. As the car pulled away, her assistant called with updates. Meetings, mergers, contracts. But all Celia could think about was that man's hand on her back. guiding her away from danger like it was the most natural thing in the world. And the way he looked at her like she wasn't a headline or a name on a Forbes list, just a woman. She wasn't used to that. And she definitely wasn't used to wanting to see someone again this badly. But she did, more than she wanted to admit. Celia stood in front of the mirror in her walk-in closet, staring at the row of meticulously tailored suits and designer blouses that suddenly felt like armor she didn't want to wear. Her fingers hovered over a navy silk blouse before she dismissed it and reached for something softer, lighter, something she hadn't worn in months. Her driver raised an eyebrow when she instructed him to take her to the east side of the city, far from the glass towers and valet lines she usually haunted. She didn't offer an explanation. She wasn't sure she had one. The construction site was easy to find, noisy, chaotic, but efficient. Men in hard hats moved with purpose, and the scent of fresh cut wood and wet concrete clung to the air. She spotted him near a stack of lumber, clipboard in hand, sleeves rolled up, his forearms dusted with sawdust. Sawyer hadn't seen her yet. She hesitated at the edge of the temporary fencing, the sharp buzz of a table saw punctuating her thoughts. She wasn't here to make herself known. She wasn't even sure why she had come. But before she could reconsider, his head turned and his eyes locked onto hers like he'd known she was coming. He walked over, brushing his hands on his jeans. "Celia, I was in the area," she said, which was an outright lie. "You're a long way from coffee shops and town cars." "So I am." He studied her, then gestured toward the trailer that served as the site office. "Want to sit?" Inside, the air was cooler, quieter. A fan hummed in the corner. There were blueprints rolled on the desk, napkins with scribbled measurements, and a lunchbox that looked like it had survived a decade of job sites. "Did something happen?" he asked. "No, I just—" She trailed off, then sat on the edge of the battered chair. "I wanted to see you." Sawyer leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "This isn't really the kind of place most people drop by." "I'm not most people," she said, then winced. "That sounded like something someone says when they are," he finished for her, a ghost of a grin tugging at his mouth. She rolled her eyes. "You're a little more sarcastic today." "I'm a little more surprised. Yesterday you were all polished edges. Now you're here, dressed like you might actually own sneakers." "I do," she said, glancing down at her feet. "Brand new, still learning how to walk in them." Sawyer laughed, then grew serious. "You okay?" "I don't know." The honesty surprised her. "I've been thinking about you and your son. And I guess I wanted to know if that offer for ice cream was going to be the last time I saw you." He narrowed his eyes slightly. "That depends. Are you planning to disappear again in a black car with tinted windows?" "No," she said. "Not unless you want me to." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for a bottle of water from the mini fridge and handed it to her. "Liam's at school," he said, sitting across from her. "He asked about you this morning, wanted to know if the lady in the fancy shoes was going to come back." Celia laughed softly. "Tell him I traded the shoes in. I'll believe it when I see it." She took a sip of water, then leaned forward. "I want to see you again." Sawyer watched her carefully. "I'm not great at games, Celia. I don't have time for them. And I don't want Liam around someone who's going to disappear the second things get complicated. That's fair. I'm not saying I don't want to see you. I do. But you've got a wall around you I can practically see. What's behind it?" She looked at him, really looked. At the man who had no idea who she was, who hadn't Googled her name or tried to impress her. And somehow that made this terrifying. There was a knock on the trailer door. One of Sawyer's crew poked his head in. "Sorry, boss. We've got a delivery truck stuck in the back lot." "Needs your eyes." Sawyer stood, nodding. "Give me 5. The man disappeared, the door swinging shut behind him. "I have to deal with this," he said, grabbing his clipboard. "Go," Celia said. "I'll wait." He paused. "You sure?" She nodded. "Unless you don't want me to." He held her gaze for a long beat. "I'll be back." She watched him leave, then glanced around the office again. A photo sat half hidden on the shelf, tilted away from view. She reached for it gently. Sawyer, younger. His arm around a woman with dark curls and a radiant smile. Liam was smaller, probably no more than 2, sitting in his mother's lap. She returned the photo, careful to place it exactly where it had been. When Sawyer returned 20 minutes later, his shirt was damp with sweat and his patience thinner. "Sorry," he said. Truck was wedged in like it was trying to bury itself. I saw the photo, she said before she could talk herself out of it. He nodded. Her name was Natalie. She was everything I didn't deserve. You loved her, still do. And yet, Celia said quietly, you're here talking to me, letting me in. Because life doesn't stop, he said, and because I know she'd want me to be happy, eventually. She stood. Do you want to take a walk when you're done here? Not a date, just two people seeing where this goes. His eyes met hers. I get off at 4, there's a park a few blocks over. Liam likes the pond. I'll meet you there. Wear shoes you don't mind getting dirty, he called after her as she stepped out. She smiled without turning around. This wasn't a merger she could analyze or a deal she could negotiate. It was messy, unpredictable, and utterly outside her comfort zone. And she wanted it more than anything she could put a price tag on. Sawyer arrived at the park with Liam balanced on his shoulders, a half-eaten granola bar in the boy's grip and dirt already streaking the knees of his jeans. The sun had dipped just low enough to cast long shadows across the path, and the pond shimmered in the golden light. A few ducks drifted lazily across the water. Celia was already there, seated on a wooden bench near the edge of the pond, phone tucked away, her hands resting in her lap. She was wearing jeans, this time real ones, and a soft gray sweater that clung to her in ways that made Sawyer's chest feel tight. Liam spotted her first. There she is. Sawyer lowered him to the ground and watched him run ahead, arms swinging wildly. Celia stood to greet him, crouching down to Liam's height. I brought something for you, she said, pulling a small paper bag from her canvas tote. Liam peeked inside. Oatmeal cookies, from a bakery I know. They're decent, but I need an expert opinion. Sawyer caught up just as Liam plopped on the grass, already chewing. He's going to expect you to bring snacks every time now. I'm okay with that, Celia said, flashing a look his way. Bribery's a perfectly acceptable tactic when you're trying to make friends. Careful, Sawyer said as they started walking. You're dangerously close to winning him over forever. Maybe that's the plan. They walked slowly, letting Liam chase ducks in the distance. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was measured, curious. A quiet waiting space between questions neither of them had dared to ask yet. Sawyer finally broke it. You always carry cookies around. Only when I expect to meet someone worth impressing. He glanced sideways at her. What about the guy? What guy? The one you're trying to impress, he said, voice low but teasing. You brought cookies for Liam. What about me? She stepped closer. You get my time. That's worth more than cookies. He stopped walking, turning toward her. You're not like anyone I've met before. That's probably true. Which means either you're exactly what you seem or you're hiding something. She didn't flinch. What if it's both? Before he could answer, Liam called out. Dad. There's turtles. Sawyer jogged over to take a look, leaving Celia behind for a moment. She watched him crouch next to his son, pointing something out along the edge of the pond. The way he focused only on Liam, the way his hand gently rested on the boy's shoulder, it made something ache inside her. Something she hadn't felt in a long time, not since she'd been forced to build a life around control, strategy, and the illusion of invulnerability. When he returned, his expression was softer. He wants to take one home. I told him turtles don't belong in apartments. You live in an apartment, 2-bedroom on the south side, decent building, close to Liam's school. She nodded, filing the information away. You've built something solid, stable. I've built what I can. Not much room for anything extra. Her voice turned quiet. What if something extra doesn't want to be extra? What if it wants to be part of it? He paused, studying her. Celia, I need to know what you're actually looking for. Instead of answering, she led them to a nearby picnic table under a tree, away from the other park goers. She waited for Liam to get distracted again, pulling twigs from the bushes, before turning to face Sawyer directly. I've spent a lifetime surrounded by people who want something from me, or think I owe them something just for existing. I built a wall so high, I forgot what it felt like to let someone climb over it. Sawyer said nothing, letting her speak. I'm not good at casual. I don't do halfway. But I don't want to keep pretending like I'm not thinking about you in meetings, or checking my phone hoping you'll call, or wondering what it would be like to wake up next to someone like you. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you don't flinch when someone pushes back. I know you raise your son without shortcuts. I know you don't ask for anything you wouldn't give twice over. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. Then you should also know I'm not interested in being some kind of escape. You're not. Her voice didn't waver. You're the first thing that's made me want to stop running. Sawyer's jaw worked for a moment. Then he asked carefully, what do you do when you're not chasing off creeps or bringing cookies to strangers? Celia hesitated, the moment finally here. She almost wanted to lie. But the truth was a test she needed him to pass. I own a company, she said. He raised an eyebrow. That's vague. It's complicated. Try me. She met his eyes. Multiple companies, actually. I manage assets, infrastructure, investments, globally. Sawyer blinked. You're not just in consulting, are you? No, he leaned back. How many zeros are we talking? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Sawyer exhaled slowly. You're a billionaire. Yes. Silence stretched between them, thick and unyielding. Liam ran over with a stick in his hand. Dad, can I draw on the path? Sure, buddy, just not near the water. When Liam darted away again, Sawyer turned back to her. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to know if you'd look at me the same way you looked at me in that alley, like a person, not a name. Not a number. He stood, rubbing a hand over the back of his neck, processing. You're not what I expected. I never am. He looked down at her, eyes steady. Do you think I care about your money? I don't know. That's what scares me. Sawyer didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he sat back down. All right, he said. So you're rich. That doesn't change the fact that I still need to be up at 6 to get Liam to school, or that I still work on job sites with busted pipes and broken deadlines. I'm not asking you to change anything. Good, he said. Because if we're doing this, I need to know it's not just because I'm some novelty. Celia reached across the table and took his hand. You're not a novelty. You're the realest thing I've touched in a decade. He looked at their joined hands. This is going to be messy. I can handle messy. He gave her a long look, then nodded once. Then we'll see where this goes. Celia smiled, not the polished boardroom version, but the kind that came from something deep. Sawyer squeezed her hand, then stood and called for Liam. We should get home. Homework before dinner. As they walked back to the parking lot, Liam skipping between them, Celia realized something profound. She had more power than most people on the planet. But in that moment, she'd never felt more grounded, and it had nothing to do with her empire. It had everything to do with the man beside her, and the boy holding her hand. The gala was already in full swing by the time Celia stepped out of the car, the marble steps of the Langford Museum awash in glittering gowns and perfectly pressed tuxedos. Violinists played under a domed glass ceiling behind her, and photographers snapped away as guests arrived. CEOs, world leaders, and tech moguls moving like planets in a perfectly coordinated orbit of power and pretense. This was her world. Or at least, the one she'd mastered. But tonight, it felt hollow. Sawyer hadn't returned her call that morning. She'd left a message, short and careful, not about business, just a quiet invitation to this event. She hadn't expected him to say yes, but part of her had hoped. She took a breath, squared her shoulders, and stepped inside. The museum had been transformed with cascading white orchids, crystal chandeliers suspended from temporary rigging, and a polished marble floor that reflected the opulence like a mirror. Her assistants flanked her for a moment, then peeled off toward the board members she was expected to charm. But she barely heard them. Her eyes searched the room, reflexive, hopeful, until she realized how ridiculous it was. He wouldn't come. Of course not. This wasn't his world, Celia. She turned, only barely registering the board chair's voice. He was saying something about the acquisition in Munich. She nodded, answered automatically, but her mind wasn't on German subsidiaries or quarterly trends. It was on a quiet construction trailer and a boy with cookie crumbs on his cheek. She'd never felt more disconnected from everything she'd built. Then, a voice behind her. You weren't kidding about this being a whole other planet. She spun around. Sawyer stood at the edge of the crowd, tugging at the lapel of a suit that didn't quite fit, but somehow made him look like the only real thing in the room. His hair was combed back awkwardly, and there was no tie. Just the stubborn kind of confidence that didn't need one. Her throat tightened. You came. I almost didn't, he admitted. I had to borrow this from my neighbor. It's from when he got married in 03. She laughed, her chest loosening. You look like yourself. He gave a small shrug. Figured if I showed up pretending to be someone else, you'd see right through me. I would've, she said softly. Before she could say more, a photographer approached, motioning toward her with a hopeful look. She gave a quick nod and he lifted the camera. Sawyer stepped back instinctively. Wait, she said, grabbing his hand. Stay in the shot. You sure? She didn't answer. She just pulled him beside her and turned toward the flash. Later, as the crowd thinned and the speeches began, she slipped them both out a side door and into the garden behind the museum. The air was cooler there, the noise distant. They walked slowly, shoes crunching softly along the gravel path. I wasn't sure I belonged in there, Sawyer said, hands in his pockets. Everyone was, curated, they are, she said. But that doesn't mean they're happy. He glanced at her. Are you? I'm getting there. They reached a low stone bench, half hidden by climbing ivy. She sat and he joined her. Liam's at my sister's tonight, he said. She's been dying for an excuse to spoil him. That's good. He deserves it. He asked if you were coming to his school's spring fair next Friday. She looked at him, surprised. He wants me there. I think you made an impression. She smiled. I'll make time. He nodded, then grew quiet. I've been thinking about what you said. About not wanting to run anymore. I meant it. So did I. He turned to face her fully. I've been alone a long time, not because I wanted to be, but because I didn't want to risk letting someone in who wouldn't stay. I had Liam to think about. It's not just me anymore. I know, she said. I'd never ask you to forget that. I also know what it feels like to look at someone and think if I let go of my fear, this could be everything. Her breath caught. I don't care about the bank accounts or the headlines, he continued. But I do care about that woman who sat on a job site in jeans just to talk to me. The one who brought cookies to a 6-year-old like it was the most important meeting of her day. She blinked quickly. I didn't plan any of this. Neither did I. He reached into his jacket awkwardly and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. He handed it to her. What is this? It's from Liam. He made me bring it in case you were here. She unfolded it. Crayon scribbles shaped into a lopsided heart, and inside it, you can be my other grown-up if you want. Her hand flew to her mouth. I told him we'd talk about it, Sawyer said gently. But the truth is, I want that too. She looked up at him, eyes shining. You do? I want something real. And for the first time in a long time, I think I know what that looks like. She stood, heart pounding, and he rose with her. Without fanfare, without hesitation, she stepped into his arms and kissed him. It wasn't tentative. It wasn't shy. It was full and certain and rooted in everything unspoken between them. When they pulled apart, she leaned against him, forehead to his. I want a life with you, not just weekends or moments in between meetings, all of it. Then let's build it, he said. Together, weeks later, they stood hand in hand at the spring fair, helping Liam tape streamers to the booth for the ring toss. Celia wore a sundress dusted with paint from the art station. Sawyer had barbecue sauce on his sleeve and a smile that hadn't left his face all day. Liam tugged on her hand. We're a team now, right? She crouched beside him. The best kind. Sawyer reached for her other hand, anchoring her between them. There were no cameras here, no press, no curated speeches. Just 3 people, under a paper banner that read Family Fun Day, laughing between string lights and lemonade stands. And for the first time in her life, Celia didn't feel like she was balancing 2 worlds. She'd finally found the one she wanted to stay in. The first time Sawyer walked into Celia's penthouse, he stopped just inside the doorway, Liam's small hand still in his eyes sweeping across the sprawling space like he'd stepped into another universe. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, the glass glittering in the early evening light. A discreet staff member took their jackets, and Liam's delighted gasp at the view echoed across the marble floor. Sawyer looked over at Celia, brows raised. I wasn't lying about the whole global asset management thing, she said carefully. You weren't, he replied, voice low. I think this place is bigger than the floor I live on. It probably is. He didn't take another step. Why now? Because you said you wanted to build something together, she said, and I realized I've been keeping half of myself locked behind doors like this. You deserve to see all of it. Liam tugged at his father's hand. Can I go look at the piano? Sawyer gave a small nod. Go ahead. Don't touch anything sharp. There's nothing sharp, Celia said, smiling at the boy as he ran toward the grand piano near the window. It's just a home. Sawyer looked at her again. Is it? If you're in it, yes. She led him past the sleek kitchen, past the art-lined hallway, and into a sitting room with oversized cushions and low lighting. Not everything was cold steel and polished surfaces. There were pieces of her here soft corners, hand-woven throws, even a stack of Liam's favorite books already waiting on the coffee table. You did this since the fair, he asked, picking up one of the books. I did it yesterday. His gaze lingered on her. You're serious. I want you both here, she said. Not just for weekends, not for short visits. I want a life that fits all three of us. Sawyer set the book down and stepped closer. You're offering a lot. I'm offering what I have, she replied, and I know it's a lot. But it's not the money I care about, it's the space, the permanence. He reached up, brushing a curl away from her temple. I've never felt like anyone built a space for me before. I didn't build it, she whispered. I just opened the door. He kissed her then, with the kind of certainty that made her knees weaken. Not urgent, not uncertain, just full of the kind of promise she hadn't known she was still allowed to hope for. Later, as Liam explored the penthouse's small rooftop garden under the careful eye of Celia's longtime housekeeper, Sawyer reclined beside her on the outdoor chaise, watching the lights of the city blink on one by one. Do you ever slow down? He asked, glancing at her. I didn't, she said. Not until you. His hand slid into hers. I like this version of you. You should see me on Sundays. I wear socks with flamingos on them. He laughed quietly. That might be too much power for one woman to wield. She leaned her head against his shoulder, the silence between them stretching into something warm. What happens next? He asked. You move in, she said. If you want, I already made space for Liam in the northeast room. It gets morning sun. And my tools. There's an entire storage room that hasn't been used in years. Sawyer was quiet for a long beat. You're not afraid of what people will say. No one who matters to me would say the wrong thing, she replied. And you're the only opinion I care about, he turned toward her then. I'm all in. The next morning they packed boxes, not many. Sawyer had never been one for clutter, and Liam just wanted to bring his dinosaur collection and a poster of astronauts. Celia helped them carry boxes up the elevator herself, insisting on it. They didn't announce the move. There was no press release. Just a quiet shift in their world, coffee mugs rearranged, toothbrushes multiplied, and the sound of laughter echoing off previously silent walls. 3 weeks later, Celia stood in front of a room filled with board members and investors at an exclusive quarterly summit in Milan. She wore a tailored suit and heels that could kill, but her gaze kept drifting to the back of the room where Sawyer stood with Liam, both slightly underdressed, both smiling like they belonged there. Because now they did. When the summit ended, she walked straight off the stage, ignoring the crowd of eager hands and congratulatory nods, and went straight to them. You crushed it, Sawyer said, slipping his arm around her waist. I had the best distraction, she replied, kissing his cheek. Liam held up a sketch pad. I drew you, but you're a superhero with fire powers. Celia took the drawing and beamed. That's exactly how I felt. That night, instead of attending the after-party at the Palazzo, they took a water taxi to a quiet corner of the canal where the lights shimmered on the water and the air smelled like salt and old brick. Sawyer had planned it, her assistant only hinted at it. As the gondolier guided them through the quiet waters, Celia leaned against Sawyer's chest, Liam curled up with a blanket and half asleep beside them. You didn't have to do this, she said softly. I wanted to, he replied. You give the world so much. I wanted to give you a quiet moment to just be. She turned to look at him fully. I love you. He kissed her then, slow and reverent. I love you more than I ever thought I'd be allowed to again. When they returned to the penthouse, Liam already asleep in Sawyer's arms, the city below was quiet. Celia stood at the window while Sawyer tucked his son into bed, watching the lights flicker across the skyline like stars that had fallen just for her. He returned minutes later, wrapping his arms around her from behind. I was thinking, he murmured, we should make this official. She turned in his arms. You mean I want to marry you, he said. Not for the penthouse or the money or the gala invitations. But because when I wake up beside you, I know I'm exactly where I belong, Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded, smiling through them. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They didn't wait for a grand ceremony. A month later, they exchanged vows in the rooftop garden, surrounded by only a handful of people, Liam holding the rings, Celia's sister officiating, and Sawyer's best friend from the construction crew standing beside him in a suit that still had paint on the cuff. Celia wore a dress that shimmered in the sunlight, her curls pinned back with a simple gold comb. Sawyer wore a navy suit and the look of a man who had found everything he never expected to want. They danced under string lights and toasted with champagne. No headlines, no paparazzi, just joy. Liam insisted on a cupcake tower instead of a traditional cake. Celia agreed without hesitation. When the night ended, they stood together on the edge of the rooftop, Liam asleep in a lounge chair nearby, the stars above them, the city below, and nothing between them. "Think we'll make it?" Sawyer asked, fingers intertwined with hers. "We already did," she whispered, and they did. He built her a breakfast nook with a hidden drawer for Liam's crayons. She canceled 2 board meetings to take them both to the coast for a weekend of sandcastles and salty air. He brought her coffee every morning before she stepped into her office. She surprised him with a small workshop space in the building, fully stocked and entirely his. They built something real. A life of ordinary, extraordinary love. Together they were home. Always.